Hello, Chris. Can you hear me? Testing. Alright, guess not. Kyle on Luke Ford's show looks like a young Noam Chomsky. Saw this ancient Chomsky and Buckley video earlier. Same mannerisms and way of talking. Interesting.
Okay, is that fixed? Okay, is that fixed? Oh, there we go.
Hello,
Right.
I can hear you. Yeah, I'm just quickly puttering around, making myself something to
Cool.
eat and drink before I go to bed. But the floor is yours. You're live to the audience if you want to say anything.
Well, first, I wanted to say that I've always enjoyed whenever Luke has a new guest on. There's like a 2-minute period of time when they're trying to figure out how to stop the echo on their microphone. It's like the okay, is that fixed? That's always my favorite part of the vetting process for a new guest.
Yeah, I find it amusing. And
Yeah.
Luke likes to say you can tell within about 1 to 2 minutes whether you like someone or not. I think he might even say 30 seconds. And you can tell that that's especially true with Mr. Ford.
Oh, I remember the first time, at least, that I saw Real Brother Radio. There was like, I don't think he ever quite got the echo issue.
No, he just didn't care ultimately, and he
barged through and made his points nonetheless. Oh, that's me. All right. So this way I'll be able to listen to you as I putter around and do stuff because I've got it on my mobile phone. So I'll be listening, but I won't be saying that much. The floor is yours, sir.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind, and this is sort of something that I've been observing when watching Kyle interact with just about almost anyone. That I think to a significant degree, anti-Semitism.
Kyle interacting with Bryden and who else? Sorry, just repeat that framing again.
Bryden and pretty much all the Irony Bros that have been on lately, but even Halsey a little bit today. I think when there's a communication breakdown between Kyle and all of those people, it made me wonder if what we would call anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish resentment, I think a large percentage of it is actually just normies reacting negatively to queers, as Pill Eater has been putting it. Queers as a placeholder for high verbal IQ, high extroversion, nonconformist people, which, is often Jews, but but like not Halsey, for example. But like not Halsey, for example.
I think that's an interesting take. And I know that I personally, I get a fair amount of that pushback, despite the fact that, as people like that go, I'm actually relatively normie presenting and more able to socialize with that sort of thing. I've gotten more like that actually over the course of my life. Like when I was younger, I was very kind of like, I was like Kyle, or like, I'm not saying the two are similar, but I was like Kyle or Ben Shapiro or
I know what you
Nathan
mean.
or Nathan Koffness or right. Yeah. And I mean, it was just sort of like, I mean, people would say what I was teased. They were like, they would call me a nerd, but I wasn't really a nerd in the sense that I wasn't really like actually I wasn't necessarily that smart or knowledgeable. I was more sort of verbal type, but I was interested in like art and the theater and
queer stuff.
Yeah, queer stuff, exactly. So I think that I think that your take is. You do what your take is. I mean, there are other factors to it than that, but I do totally understand exactly what you're getting at there. And I think that I want to hear more of your theory. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess sort of, for me, something like the whole Kevin McDonald thing, that was more difficult for me to swallow than any of the HBD stuff, because I'm a former leftist, and it was really Ryan Falk's videos that started to change my general views, starting out with just simple factual stuff. And that's something that I've always found interesting is that, like people say stuff like Richard Spencer's spiritual appeal or the intellectual arguments for white nationalism. Those would have never in a million years had any influence on me at all. And if I hadn't been exposed to stuff like what Ryan Falk was doing, I would have just thought Richard Spencer was just full of it. But back to the main point, I guess, with something like the K-Mac theory, I was very reluctant to it for various reasons, and yet, when I looked at the Koffness critique, it almost seems to work. But then when you think about the numbers and you think about just how frequently Jews in the United States would be in that, relatively intellectually nonconformist, highly confrontational, argumentative personality type. I think that they just end up becoming the figureheads for that sort of type of person, which does include a lot of Anglos, might include more Germanics than Anglos, which just by pure genetic distance from Ashkenazi Jews, I guess makes sense. Would you say? Might include more Germanics than Anglos, which just by pure genetic distance from Ashkenazi Jews, I guess makes sense. Would you say? And you also certainly see some of the South Asians with that type, but not super often. I think as far as the queer stuff goes, I think that.
Sorry, what was the question you asked me earlier? Something about Ashkenazim?
Well, I guess, basically that I have noticed personally that it seems that when you're looking at this sort of general personality type and the political views and behaviors that tend to go along with it, like the highly confrontational argumentative style, the enjoying arguing, all that kind of stuff, the high verbal IQ, extroverted stuff, that is, most stereotypically associated with Ashkenazi Jews.
Yeah.
In my experience, I tend to see more among like Germanic Americans than among Anglos, although of course you do see it among Anglos too. And just, Ashkenazim are obviously on the whole closer to Levant in terms of gene clusters, but the European component is closer to sort of Northern Italian, Central European than Anglo. So I mean,
yes, that's true.
That's purely anecdotal, though.
Yeah. No, what you're saying though, genetically speaking, is indeed correct. And I notice exactly what you're talking about. My theory is that that it's really sort of a Mediterranean or a Middle Eastern thing, but a specific variant of this kind of conversational, the specific variant of this kind of conversational mode can be found amongst Ashkenazim, and as you described earlier, some consider it like a fairly high level form of discussion. I like that kind of conversation. I think it's fun. I enjoy talking like that.
Me too. And I often feel more comfortable around Jews. Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, I'm almost done fixing myself this dish and just sort of cleaning up my kitchen. So I'll be listening in. If you have any other thoughts, you had a lot of interesting stuff you were saying in the comment section. So
I do. I'll see if I can get myself back on.
I'd love to hear you serenade us with a lovely high IQ monologue, because I like what you have to say so far.
Right,
and I don't know you. I haven't seen your avatar and username before in the comment section, so I might know you by something else. But yeah, it seems like you've been watching the Fordverse for a while.
Yeah, I've been watching it for a while, mostly not commenting on chat or anything.
Oh, so you're one of the lurkers. That makes sense.
Yeah, just about. Yep. Yeah, I mean, really. In fact, I actually started watching Luke in 2015. So before he started regularly streaming. And what I was talking about earlier, because one thing that I've noticed is you, Babs, you seem to be just about the only person in any of the chats lately, or in any of the conversations on Luke Ford live streaming lately, that has been following his channel, or at least is familiar with his channel other than the context of live streaming, because of course it seems like he's had a big expansion of viewers from that. But I started watching it like before he made like the Luke Ford Alexander technique videos, and when he was mostly talking about eroticized rage and a few other things about Judaism and everything. But so it kind of gave me a different perspective on it all, and so it is funny to see people wander in and not know anything about him other than that he's a Jew. But so I guess with this stuff, like one thing that I noticed from my anecdotal experience that made K-Mac make sense, and then there was also something that made him not make sense. All the stuff about, again, sort of, the really obvious stuff like the Israel hypocrisy, like, oh, building a wall is inhumane, but in my other country we have a wall and that's okay. I mean, that's pretty low-hanging fruit. That's not big brain nibba stuff. That's pretty obvious. I mean, and if you talk to anyone else, you'll find Korean Americans that complain about racism in California, and then talk about how, oh, you need Korean blood to have a Korean visa, and that's good because it's our country. I mean, that stuff's a dime a dozen. But what interested me was all that stuff about the intense argumentation, and I'm actually sort of in a position where I have Jewish family members that are not related to me, but through marriage. Not that I married, but other basically family, like step family. Who I can be more honest with about, my views than a lot of my own biological family, who I have to hide from. And I mean, and that is like, that to me, just in my personal experience, was very inconsistent with the idea that white people are just being led around on a leash by their Jewish captors. That I just could not believe that, because it was so obvious to me that in my own experience, most of the people that were truly, absolutely dedicated to some sort of leftist or egalitarian, descriptive egalitarian leveling ideology tended to be Anglos or even Scots-Irish sometimes. They were white, they were Goyim. Whereas, of course, some Jews that I know are like that, but the ones that are like that are half Anglo. So the idea that that's just something that sort of primed me to think that the Koftas critique made sense. The idea that, of course, if there's no pushback, all else being equal, Jews on all sides of the political spectrum are going to support their interests to some degree. But on the other hand, I also know, I know a full-blooded Ashkenazi Jew who absolutely believes Israel should be abolished. I mean, that's more common than a lot of people, I think, realize.
Much more common than a lot of people realize. And what's funny is that's almost I have a lot to say about that, but sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'll please go ahead for a bit. I'll come back. I'll join.
No, I was just about to say this isn't directly related, but about all the Ashkenazi diaspora, and Israeli Ashkenazi Jews who wish for Israel to be abolished. Really, what this is, functionally speaking, and I think this may also semi-deliberately be the case, is it's effectively a borderline genocidal, or at the very least a very hostile kind of ideological stance taken against what they view as the sort of like dark shadow selves of their own selves. That being the sort of, what do you call it? They hate the what they perceive as kind of like the parochial, uncivilized right wing. The uncivilized right wing Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews, and that sentiment of the the sort of the nationalist or traditionalist Jew, or the Levantine Jew for that matter, and the Oriental Jew, and they fear that within themselves, and therefore and really that's ultimately what they hate. That's really who the people who they are screwing over are, because Ashkenazi Jews mostly have visas, a way to get out of Israel, but who effectively these people part of Jewish. These Ashkenazi, it's a form of kind of like classism imbued, kind of like ethnically tinted. Kind of like anti-Mizrahi Sephardic thing from Ashkenazi Jews is kind of what my perception of it, as these sort of like wealthy Ashkenazi Jews who could live anywhere in the world as a global citizen, be like, Israel is just so like reactionary and white supremacist, and it's like this parochial colonial society, and it's like, why can't these Mizrahi Jews just live under the Arabs like they did for thousands of years? That was fine, wasn't it? It's just like such it's just like
there were
kind of like this
thousands of them, or
it's the, what is it? It's the politics of sort of like, speaking from a place of sort of being above it all and being like, oh, well, really, it's not that bad, is it? And it's just very like paternalistic, awful kind of like bullshit. But sorry, ignore my point. Please go on to what you were saying.
I mean, it definitely relates to it in the sense that, like, I guess the idea that it's some sort of biologically driven coordination to facilitate the group interests, it just doesn't explain why. For example, if you look at Israel, people are fond of pointing out, and there are some hilarious statistics, and I do mention them sometimes when, again, people that I know are using some of those hypocritical arguments. I mean, one of the more hilarious ones I heard recently, I don't remember where I read it, but it was somewhere that I would not be too worried about going and double checking, but that 30% of Israelis support like acts of physical violence against African asylum seekers, and they're willing to tell that to a poller, which is, again, I mean, that's pretty unthinkable. But but when you look at something like the situation in Israel, where pretty overwhelmingly people are, if I remember correctly, something like 75% believe in maintaining its status as a Jewish state, maintaining special privileges for Jews within Israel, maintaining the occupation, all that stuff that you would consider to be Zionist, in a pejorative sense at UCLA. People would use it in a pejorative sense at UCLA. And what I find interesting about that is that when you break it down in Israel, it looks a little bit more like the ethnic groups that are, more like Arabs, so to speak, have the kind of views that Arabs have, very common sense.
Because that is the way of, what I like to describe as the normal world, but that's the way of, for instance, North Africa. North Africa, the Middle East, East Africa, Southwest Asia, regions like that. People there, deal in, common sense, like you were saying a moment ago. It's what do you call it? It's the thing about the African thing, it's funny that Westerners think like, oh, well, that's unthinkable. It's like, well, Israel lets in African asylum seekers. Look at all the Arab countries that don't let them in, and if they try to come in, we'll physically remove them or probably shoot at them or something like that. And then when they do and then even on top of that, the Arab countries, even Jordan, does not allow Jews to hold citizenship. I mean, Israel allows Arabs to hold citizenship. Even Israel allows Africans to hold citizenship. I just think it's interesting, the difference between the sort of Western worldview and the, for instance, even as nearby to the West in terms of, Middle Easterners are quite close to Westerners in many ways in the big scale of things, but what a radical cultural difference a few miles can make.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and I guess what's funny about like looking at Israel is that when you look at the opinion on things like immigration, the European Jews within Israel, who are, if I remember correctly, not even 50%, within that group, the opinion to me seems to be pretty similar to what the opinion would be in, say, Germany or Sweden or France, or even among white Americans, where, I mean, again, like the people that would be okay with, Salvini or Trump or, those types of people within Israel, those are the people that are holding the so-called extreme Zionist views within Israel. And there are those people in that hypocritical space in between, but those are people trying to square the circle. The long-term trend is toward either you're okay with nationalism, but you don't really care about of course, I don't blame ordinary Mizrahi Jews in Israel for like not really caring per se about Germany, but they don't seem to be overtly hostile to it. And the ones that are overtly hostile to it increasingly are hostile to Israel as well. I mean, one thing that I've noticed, and I try to use this to sort of convince both kind of, pre-SJW Democrat types, New Dealers and sort of normie conservatives that they need to be more formalist, is that contradictions in political views tend to be erased per generation.
Ooh, formalism. It's been a while since I've heard that. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's like, I guess what I'm getting at is that everyone, people are capable of holding, of course, highly hypocritical, contradictory views. I mean, one of the favorite ones, people that, going back all the way to like Moldbug, people love to point out is the stereotypical urban liberal hypocrite who maybe lives in a gentrifying neighborhood, and it's funny because sometimes this is a straw man. Like, not that many people in like Palo Alto actually live in gated communities, right? I mean, it's not that common. They just, well, anyway, that's a sidetrack. But I guess what I'm getting at is that when you sort of imagine, in the alt-right conception, the stereotypical urban white liberal or Jewish white liberal hypocrite who, complains about racism in Ferguson, Missouri, or Orlando, and then, live in a neighborhood that's systematically moving blacks out to suburbs so that they can gentrify urban spaces for art galleries and gay sex clubs or whatever else they do. And what to me is funny about that is that, like, that type of hypocrisy cannot exist without people having the personal experience of being in insecure urban areas. And I mean, it doesn't take long for people to figure that out, but like, there's a reason why people in, the Bronx, say white gentrifiers living in the Bronx, people living in Vermont, I mean, they're exposed to more or less similar media, but of course the first one is capable of holding a hypocritical position due to personal experience, perhaps even traumatic, violent personal experience. Or, everyone's talked to their boomer parents, and one thing I've noticed talking to boomers, especially liberal boomers, is they all agree that white flight was because of racism and discrimination and the lack of capital and capital being moved away and poor regulation, all that stuff, except whatever city they grew up in. In whatever city they grew up in, there was a real crime problem, and they narrowly avoided having to go to the bad schools, or maybe they had to go to the bad schools and they were resentful about it. So their own city, that was different. But everywhere else, it was because of racism. Everywhere else, there wasn't a crime thing. There was just a false fear of the crime thing. But coincidentally, in the place where they lived, and in only that place, there was an actual crime thing. So that's something that comes from personal experience. That type of contradiction can't exist within an ideology. So, for example, if among like older millennial Jews that I know who hold the hypocritical view, and that's not all of them. I mean, it's maybe half of them, maybe less. The ones that hold the hypocritical view, they went to Hebrew schools in young age. They heard all the mythology. and I mean, again, I don't want to get into the specific history, but there are things like Norman Finkelstein has talked about stuff about the 6-Day War and some areas. Now, like I said, I mean, of course, I mean, the Arabs were, I mean, they lost. I guess you could say they lost fair and square, but point being, they heard the mythology about the 6-Day War and about how only God could have been responsible for this miracle, all that kind of stuff, and then suddenly they've got. As they get older, the SJW narrative, the anti-white mass immigration narrative starts to develop more and more until, it has a full narrative of open borders. You don't say the word open borders, but yeah, open borders is a human right, but only in the Western world, not in Israel. I mean, they had to have the specific life experience that they had, which may have even included a trip to Israel for many of these kids, going through scary checkpoints. And then meanwhile growing up in an area of the United States, maybe in a college town where things are more or less okay. That type, it is their personal lived experience that makes that hypocrisy possible. The other thing about hypocrisy, of course, is that it's usually unsaid, it's unspoken, it's implicit, but you can't transmit implicit ideologies generationally. Like what you teach generationally, that is what people base their worldview on. And
that's a great point, actually.
Right?
That's a brilliant point. I'm with you on that.
Basically, like the boomer and Gen Xer, hypocritical liberal Jewish Zionists, like their kids are undoubtedly shifting toward being overtly anti-Israel because it's like, have you seen that meme where it's the two Korean parents with plastic surgery and then the kid, that's much less attractive and it says like plastic surgery, you can't hide it forever. It's like ideological contradictions. You can't hide them forever because your kids will eventually grow up and expose them. That's one thing I find interesting about like what I originally watched your channel in actually 2016. You made a response to Sargon during one of the like individualism gates. But and then you were talking about basically how
that was the first time. That was the first Sargon millennial woes debacle.
That's right. Yeah, that was the very first debate. And that's when I first noticed your channel and hearing about like Iraqi Jews and stuff. And so, I'm sure that like people of that generation are much more able to hold that contradiction. And that's why I was interested in your channel because I could tell that you came from at least on one side of your family. I don't remember, not that I need to know every detail, but that at least part of your family were, New York City, somewhat culturally elite Jewish liberals, right? I mean, and so I'm sure they have some of those contradictions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if they would necessarily self-describe as liberals, maybe liberal affiliated. They probably consider themselves a bit, we're not liberal, we're progressive, or in some ways we're liberal, but in some ways we also.
That's how my dad is too.
Yes, but I also read a lot of Murray Bookchin in my childhood, and I was very much influenced by them. And of course, I'm also a big fan of They probably wouldn't describe us. We're no simple liberals, but yeah, functionally speaking, yes.
Right, and and something like in your case, when I noticed that you had been exposed to the HBD because of the internet and all that stuff, and things that you sort of pick up, and the personal experience of growing up in the city, and most of us as young kids, like those of us who grew up in suburbs, like the idea that cities, that there are just no-go zones in cities. Like I remember reading about like in Memphis, there was a series of curbings. Like people were literally hanging out near like where a major area, and there were just these gangs of kids going around taking people and like curb stomping them. But then the way that they wrote the articles, like the local news articles, like it took a while to, like they would describe something that happened and you'd be like, holy shit, they just described roving gangs of people that just take people and curb them. And I was like, that's literally apocalyptic. But the way they described it, they were like, he was assaulted in a manner that resulted in, and then, in serious injuries. And they go on to explain what happened. And then it's like, the guy's like being tube fed for months. Like the idea that like, that's just something that happens in cities for kids that grew up in the suburbs, that's not like, we don't think that way. We think kids that grew up in suburban areas think a little bit more like the way, I don't know, Japanese people or Germans until recently thought, which is like, sure, you might get people hooting and hollering at you in the city, but people don't just randomly murder you or randomly curb stomp you on the street. Whereas like for boomers, it's like, well, it's just always been that way. Like there's just certain places you can't go in cities. And so there's a lot of kids that grow up in that scenario, and then of course they move, and then they find out, oh wow, this is. And I think that's one of the things that pushes people to HBD is like growing up being like the boomers grew up seeing the big variety of human diversity in their childhood, and then once they grew up, they got all these sophisticated arguments for why those differences are not legitimate. Like that's what I see with my dad, right? I mean, he grew up, but then. For people that sort of do the opposite, I think the opposite doesn't really work. Like, you can't grow up in a sheltered environment where everything's reasonable, then move to a more, move and get a more worldly experience. Like, you can't put the cat back in the bag unless you have a really curated ideological life. And so, like,
I'm totally on board with you when you say that. I've actually had almost the exact same thoughts myself.
Yeah, and I see a lot of older millennials, even people. I noticed even a gap between people me and like maybe 4, 3, 5, 4, 6 years older than me, where like for them, they basically that little narrow period when your mind is still flexible, like after college for 5 or 6 years, ended around like 2012, whereas mine ended, I guess theoretically around now, and so for them. Those narratives that they had in high school about, white flight caused the bad schools caused the bad behavior, and there isn't bad behavior anyway because it's really just the biased police. Like they're still on those narratives, but even people just a little bit younger, you start to see it breaking down. And so I think you're sort of the approach that you're taking, like with your channel, and I mean, and you've mentioned before, it's sort of aspirational. It may never happen, but the idea of ending the diaspora, the idea of, returning to roots, returning to, in Slezkin's terminology, the Apollonian root of, tough, not wimpy, whiny, funny Jews, but tough, powerful, intellectually serious, not intellectually frivolous Jews. And to me, that seems like something that would come straight out of the recognition that you can't have one standard for Israel and one for other countries, not as a matter of opinion, but just as a matter of like cognitively, you can't
Exactly.
Right?
And this is why, what arguments vibe with me. Israel is ours or Judea is ours because God promised us this land, whether that's true or not, that doesn't appeal to me. What about, we deserve this land because we were treated badly. We deserve this land because the Holocaust. No. We deserve this land because we're Jews. No. We deserve this land no more, no less than any other indigenous people deserves their land, and we should fight to defend it accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that ties into, I think, one of the things that makes me cringe so much is when you see people talk about the genocide of white South African farmers is unfair and it's terrible. And, Europeans losing their homelands, Africa for the Africans, Asia for the Asians, but Europe for everyone. You see those memes, and then a lot of the time when people get challenged, now I know that they're just doing this rhetorically, but they'll respond and say, when someone says, yeah, well, what about the Native Americans? And they'll say something like, yeah, we won, get used to it. And that type of a narrative is like, I mean, it is so obviously hypocritical, and whatever like reptile brain response it produces in a former conservative pro-Israel Christian to hear a liberal Zionist Jew say open borders for America and Germany and Italy, but racial violence for Israel, that same like viciously angry response, right, must be happening in people that see that response from like white nationalists. And it's like, and of course the other response people say is, well, who cares what people think? And it's like, well, if what other people thought,
well, probably the people who you're disregarding the opinions of.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like,
and I mean, one has to, think about suitable countermeasures to that. I mean, I have a, who cares what people think response when I say stuff like, well, Israel just needs to sort of like sever ties with a kind of like Western access, ditch all these kind of like Eurocentric Enlightenment pretenses and ideals, and effectively
I like what I'm hearing.
Revert to kind of like a, channel the kind of like zealot mindset more than anything else, and sort of like, reverts to a, I don't know, to a society that isn't afraid to engage in certain types of behavior. I mean, Wait, geez, I'm sorry, I'm kind of tired. I didn't even know where I was going with that, but I was just saying, shit. Wait, what was I saying a moment ago? Where did I start?
Returning to the roots and returning to a more aggressive posture as a nation.
Oh man,
advocating for not that they have a right to the land, but that they must defend it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I do say like, well, yeah, to hell with international law. To hell with what people think. To hell with like what moralizing Westerners and like moralizing like Ashkenazi Jews think.
Oh yeah.
But it's like but at the same time, it's like so what are you going to do about what those people think? And I'm perfectly willing to accept that there's going to be immense blowback. You have to take into account what how to deal with that and stuff like that. So, but I mean, yeah sorry. Go ahead.
And I would say, like, as far as the hypocrisy goes, the importance of white nationalism, and I'm using the term in a big tent sense, right? I mean, I'm including things like implicitly white civic nationalism, which would be, right. But I guess like the reason why there has to be consistency is not so much for pleasing enemies, for pleasing anti-whites that are arguing in bad faith, but for like internal propaganda. Because if white people were like, I don't know, if they were like Black South Africans or Mizrahi Jews in Israel, and they did not care about how they were perceived by other groups, whether they're hypocritical, if they didn't care about that, then they wouldn't be in the position they're in, right? I mean, clearly they are governed by a universalistic moral code, and imploring them to reject the universalistic moral code from an argument that assumes the framework of a particularist moral code, that's like automatically, that's already failed. I mean, again, like if that hadn't have failed, then Europeans wouldn't be in the position that they're in.
Very true.
And that just makes me, I can only imagine, because I remember way back when, I mean, 2007, 2008, when I'd see, random comments on YouTube from like Stormfronters, usually posting the white genocide meme, and they would say something and they'd make me think that something I had never heard before. Like, for example, why should Chinese have a right to China, but Americans not have, but white people not have British not have a right to Britain, whatever. And I'd hear that and I'd kind of be like, okay, well, that's completely outside of my frame. So they have some explaining to do. Then the next thing that happens is, fuck the Indians, we're going to give you some smallpox blankets or something like that. And then of course I would just go like, oh, well, this person's obviously just arguing in bad faith. And, and so like that type of argument clearly has already failed. And in order for white people, I mean, even a plurality of white people to accept basic principles of sovereignty for Europeans, I mean, there has to be, to some degree, they absolutely just rhetorically must engage in the nationalism for all peoples thing. And when Richard Spencer, I mean, this was from the Ryan Falk video, the really long one about Richard Spencer, like the section where he's saying, we took this land by force and we made it ours. When the woman has specifically asked him, do you think that white people have benefited from colonialism and all that stuff? And then he immediately accepts the frame. I mean, that undoes. There are so many people out there that are on the fence.
If you look at the numbers, I don't think that on a whole, most European colonial and imperial ventures even ended up being that monetarily successful, materially
they
rewarding.
Were drained, absolutely. And they were ideologically
I'd say most were drained. Some weren't. Like the Mediterranean colonialists were, and as well as I think the Belgians, as it were quite extractive and
sure.
and good with that. But there were also periods where colonialism, more was sunk in than what was gotten out, and more was given than what was taken.
Well, what was funny
even if those things that were quote given weren't, it was pearls to swine is one perspective, and another perspective is, those things that were given, it's like a forced kind of Eurocentric cultural norms. It's like, we don't want your quote more civilized stuff. We'll build it from the ground up. So it's like, why even bother? But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that irritated me, and I know the exact exchange you're referring to.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember being in high school and having sort of a vague fill-in-the-blank view of colonialism, and so my mindset was always, again, without ever really reading it, I mean, I had a lot of general knowledge, but it was mostly post-colonial knowledge, and I sort of assumed, this was all the way back, and I think I'm older than you. This was 2006, 2007, and I remember just sort of assuming like, okay, the European countries established colonies in Africa. they did it. And like, if I were to go look at primary documents from the period, they would say the African continent is rich with resources. We better go get it before the Germans do. And that's just what I assumed. And then I had this African course, taught by a white liberal guy, but who had spent a lot of time in Africa, and it was part of a trip to Africa. And in the course, he was mentioning, like, there was some question, like in homework, true or false, European, kingdoms, governments, empires, organized imperialism in Africa in advance to gain resources. And of course, the answer turned out to be false. And he was like, no, it started out where the colonies did not want to go get involved. They thought it would be a huge economic drain. They thought it was way too hard to get the resources. They could just trade with Arabs that already had, trade networks in place anyway. And so, that in fact, the governments were reluctant to do this. And it was the missionaries that really were, now you can say they were hypocritical, but they really were of the opinion that the Africans are suffering and that they must be, uplifted. And, that was Christian idealism. And it's like, once I got that specific information, it started to make more sense, but then it also becomes uncomfortable because it's like, this is the I remember 2012, the Coney 2012, that's when the white savior complex became a very popular meme. And that was used to bash white
What differentiates that from the sort of, expansionist Christian proselytism?
Exactly.
We'll save your soul, from the sort of colonial white man's burden, and what differentiates that from the modern sort of, we'll give you liberalism, we'll give you capitalism, we'll give you, all these good things, respect to minorities, respect to gays, these quote, Western.
Whatever Western imperialist or interventionist or, whatever you want to call it, Zog controlled, if you want to go that direction, whatever one wants to call it, whatever intervention people support, if they're sort of generally to the left, progressives, of course, when they oppose the intervention, it's racist, Ku Klux Klan colonialism. But when they support it, it's always for the reason of protecting minorities, all that stuff, and that's true with Syria. It's true with like sanctions against Russia, all that stuff, and even when Trump is president, really even when they talk about how racist America is, when they perceive the imperial presence of the United States as being defending, well, I was going to say minorities, but in Syria, it's about defending Sunni Muslims, but I guess defending favored groups within the progressive stack from various enemies. Like, that's always the justification. And I just sit back and I think, what type of people would have justified British imperialism? The types of people that were probably pushing for progressive social change and who were probably very critical of the British Empire in some weird moral sense, the same way people are critical of America in some weird moral sense. But when it comes to the actual policies, they overwhelmingly support expansion of that same institution, because from their point of view, they see it as a more powerful hammer to whack their enemies. I mean, I had a friend he was heavily involved in like Occupy Wall Street. And I had this big disagreement with him around 2012, a couple months after the disastrous intervention in Libya. And, and he was arguing in favor of it. And I just couldn't, I couldn't believe that he would defend the intervention in Libya. And, the way that he put it basically was, this person was an enemy of progressivism. We destroyed him. I mean, it was that simple. And then, of course, I asked him, why not Iraq? And he was like, well, that's because the people that carried out the Iraq war were ideological opponents. I mean, you could call it cynical, but you could also just call it calculated.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, totally with you here. I think that it's interesting, the rhetoric that's used to mask the what is, I guess, sort of the neo-colonial and Europeanist thing. I mean, why is it that you think Europeans have this kind of type of, you see this behavior pattern manifesting itself again and again. Curious, where do you think its origin point lies? And Norma Paulo was on the call.
Yeah, I hope I didn't mean to monopolize and make him leave.
No, it's fine.
I did hear him.
Yeah. Just if he wants to come back and check in at any point, he's free to.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I was actually just about to bring him in, but then my mic had an issue. But yeah, hold on. I'm just going to post the link in the chat.
Great. Well, maybe
the floor. No, yeah. But sorry, go ahead.
Maybe he can respond to this if he comes back. I was just going to say, one thing that I hear a lot from, again, so the sort of the more like irony bros, sort of like, alt-light, somewhere between alt-light and alt-right, people that are MAGA, but then also they know about racial differences, but maybe they probably don't know about IQ in detail, all that stuff. There's a lot of those kinds of people like Nick Fuentes, who, I like those people. I like their content, but I'll hear a lot from those types of people, something about how, what's wrong with the West? Not long ago, in less than 100 years ago, earlier this century, they were based and they were, shooting Africans with machine guns and this colonialism stuff. And then it's like, I think that's just purely, that truly is just wishful thinking. Like, the Battle of Omdurman, the Sudan thing, the first use of the Gatling gun battle, like that was literally to stop the Africans, the Arab Africans from like enslaving. That was stopping slavery. That was Europeans killing off the Africans to stop slavery. All of that colonialism stuff to me is obviously just an earlier incarnation of the same pathological altruism. I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying it is pathological altruism, but the thing that we call today pathological altruism, the earlier incarnation of that was the imperialism, because it was based on the same principles. I don't know. I guess it's like, you could say it's blue-pilled, but I think it's maybe more likely that maybe the problem, I think it's safe to say the problem is earlier than, it's not like 1965, all of a sudden there was this massive change. Even Ryan Falk, I think, once implied this, but then earlier on, he had videos talking about how the imperialism was very much like the modern pathological altruism. It's a very similar thing. The same Muslim Eurasians. I think maybe it sounded like I said that, but what I mean is they were like the Beja people, some other North Sudanese people. The point being, they're people that, an average college student today would call black. And so when someone sort of imagines something like, this idealized image of white people being powerful and asserting their will over Africans, a lot of the time, that was Europeans trying to impose their universal morality onto Africans, and of course they were willing to use more violence, than they are today. But to me, it does seem like imperialism in Africa and Merkel's boner, they're clearly coming from the same. They're coming from a similar ideological point, right? I don't see how that would be all that controversial. That's where like probably Norvin would probably agree with that. Like the sort of pagan types would definitely be in agreement that, and they might attribute it to Christianity or they might attribute it to Jewish influence. I don't know. Depends, I'm sure. But, to me, it's like,
which are usually the same to a lot of those pagan types.
That's often just kind of, maybe you wouldn't call the Beja black, but like if a Beja person wandered onto UCLA campus, 99% of people would say that's a black guy, that was, do you remember Save Darfur, Babs? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. That was a while ago, towards the beginning of my life.
I was in middle school when that was going on, and that was one of those things where I very specifically remember, like every Merkel is a stooge of the American Empire. Sure, exactly. And in that argument, you could say that the American Empire is continuing a very similar trajectory as the British Empire of making the world safe for universalistic morality. Oh, interesting. Okay. Sorry, I just see in the comments here. Well, and I guess, the point being, though, that someone is creating the desire to socially signal. And I don't know if Norman would consider earlier European colonialism based on Christian idealism to be, is that just social signaling, or is there a deeper ideological root? Obviously, I think that there's Okay, I mean, I would think that there is an ideological root to it, but I guess just going back to the Save Darfur thing, I remember like the only place where I live that had Save Darfur stuff everywhere was the college campus and the Jewish Community Center, and the way that it was talked about at the time, I remember even progressives were saying, like they were all talking about this as if it was like people that look like Yasser Arafat killing like these black Africans. And then when I actually found pictures of like the militia, like they called them the Janjaweed militias, like every single one of them were people that we would call black. And that was that. And of course that was because Israel was an enemy of Sudan. But it was a really funny thing. And I ended up meeting some crazy left-wing activists that were trying to point out that Save Darfur was bullshit and claiming that Save Darfur was, a Zionist thing. I mean, that's a whole different topic. But anyway, I mean,
well, on a slightly related note, I do find it very interesting the hyper racialization of what a lot of really American whites and American blacks and American browns, they like it's the sort of hyper racialization of the Arab Jewish conflict or the Israeli Palestinian conflict, whatever you want to say. It's very interesting. Yeah, it's the white versus brown. It's the colonial versus the authentic, the invader versus the native, the indigene, the Western versus the Eastern, the Oriental. It's fascinating, really, the way in which it's just really, because not only is it sort of misportrayed as such, in a rather similar way to the cases that you just described, but it's in reality, I think the Israel situation is most akin to the Liberia situation. What is the difference between a Liberian mulatto and an Ashkenazi Jew? In their respective part indigenous lands. Dealing with the current inhabitants of that land and in manners that are influenced by Western colonialism. I mean, there really isn't that much of a difference. But the what do you call it? The hyper like distinction, and this is done by both the sort of the people in the sort of like people who are like, we like Western chauvinism and Western values. They're like, look, Israel is civilized. Israel is I mean, they don't say white, but Israel's a Western, civilized, productive, intelligent, capitalist, democratic, freedom-loving country with women who can wear bikinis. And then you have these uncivilized, stupid, low IQ, Arab savages, primitives, and then on the other hand,
they've obviously never been to a beach in Lebanon.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have these idiots on the left, and on the left, the sort of like Western left, who are like, you have these the authentic, pure indigenous Arabs that have been there. They descend from the Canaanites, they descend from the Philistines, the true inhabitants of the land versus the evil foreign colonial interloper, these blonde, blue-eyed haired Jews, these gingered, pink-skinned Jews, whoever heard of light-skinned Levantines anyway? And I mean, and it's like clearly, you only need to look so far as genetics tests. Or, physically Ashkenazi Jews. I mean, what is it? Like the Jewfro and the Jew nose are literally like, what are they? They're just Middle Eastern or Levantine features that are being noticed out in the context of a Western backdrop. And when suddenly Ashkenazi Jews, who, due to the fact that they are mixed race, part European, part Levantine Hebrew, were formerly in the West considered, oh, look at that Jewfroed, Jew-nosed Asiatic outsider, go back to Palestine. Suddenly it becomes, the Jew as the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, chisel-jawed,
Aryan,
Aryan, Western, colonialist, imperialist, Nazi, fascist, stomping down on the authentic, native, indigenous, hyper brown Palestinian. When in reality, you got the size. In terms of aggregate hue, is Palestinian, quote unquote, from the West Bank, or like a Lebanese or Syrian Arab really is no different from a Mizrahi or Sephardic Jew or an Ashkenazi Jew oftentimes. So it's just really, the whole thing is it's just silly, but it just goes to show the way in which that type of thinking can manifest. I find that to be a particularly interesting case. I think
totally. I mean, some of the Arabs are whiter. I mean, particularly in the northern Levant, because it was always kind of a spectrum, and but yeah, it's I mean, are you familiar at all with the whole like Rwanda, Burundi, and then later the Congo War? Like, I spent probably 2 years of my life reading about that, and there are leftists like in the United States, like post-colonial theorists, who, I mean, there are people that have devoted like academic careers to analyzing how like the Hutus are the oppressed group. I mean, and they do have some interesting arguments, but like basically there was a whole industry in Washington, D.C. that the Rwandan government hired after 1994 to try and paint their government in a good light. And they immediately went to the Israel model. So you have these progressive liberal Jews, living in college towns who basically view Tutsis as analogous to the Jews of Africa. That term has even been used, the Jews of Africa, and, surrounded by a sea of enemies like the Arabs, the Hutus. And then there are leftists, there are like black nationalists that talk about how the the Tutsis are like agents of Zionism, and how they were agents of European colonialism, and how the Hutus are another case of oppressed Africans. And it really is like they go around and they just everywhere in the world, they see whichever group reminds them of white people. Or if they're
exactly. This is it. Yeah. Literally, like they plug them into the mold of the evil white, pale-skinned, fascistic, colonialist, authoritarian oppressor, and the poor indigenous, like less, developing sort of like, and, both of those are completely inaccurate portrayals. And, it's basically another reason why I think that this is promoted is because it's sort of the kind of, I guess, like subtle white supremacist kind of like Western chauvinist leftist types lap it up because it feeds into their white savior complex, as it were. And it's like, we must rush to the aid of the authentic indigenous brown folk against evil whitey because, their white guilt tank is still full. Their white guilt tank isn't quote running close to empty, as Jewel Citizen self-describes in the chat. So, it's interesting the way the whole dynamic plays out. It's really so complex and it's so fascinating the way and now this is just commonplace. That sort of like that axis, the sort of or the sort of like that binary, it's the white black binary, but it's so much more than that, you know what I mean? And it's just such an interesting take, isn't it? Because all conflict can sort of be shoehorned into that model in one form or another, although many of those shoehornings are actually a result of obfuscation of who truly holds the power or who holds the whip hand in, let's say, a long-term or real power historical situation. I mean, really, who is, people say the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, like, for example, but at the same time, look at the relationship between Jews and the Arab world, and you'll see a rather different relationship to the, evil white Israeli Western oppressors, and the, harmless indigenous, 100% pure indigenous Levantine Arabs. I mean, if you look at the big historical picture, you'll see a very different situation. But if you just look at, the past 100 years or so, then so it's interesting the way that it's interesting the way that like that shoehorning works.
Well, and another thing about it too, in addition to the white guilt thing, is that I've also noticed that it enables people to very quickly become much more knowledgeable. Like they really can just do a very, very brief amount of research on any world conflict and immediately, like, for example, the Karen versus the Rodinga. Like, I've met people that are like educated people I've had them say with complete confidence, like, well, the Rodinga are being oppressed by the Karen. And they'll just say that. And I know a lot of these people I knew back in like 2004, 2005 sometimes. And back then,
it's like whoever's more brownish, more Muslim-ish, more developing-ish, kind of. It's like, it's really, really, it's like, as you were saying a moment ago, it's just a simple model that people can sort of plug things into and get an answer out of.
Yeah.
But it's like, if the model itself is faulty and flawed, and the information that's being plugged in is being plugged in incorrectly, into the wrong boxes, then, of course, what's going to be popped out, although it might seem like an answer, because it might just be, a load of nonsense, or at worst sort of harmful propaganda that is used to justify things like genocides of indigenous people. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You were saying about your intelligent friend.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of those types of people, they were just normies. They were people that were non-political. And so back before this type of frame became popular, like back when Saved R4 was pretty much confined to either like weird evangelicals and very active, like boomer progressive Jewish liberals were really the only two people that cared about it. When it was kind of this obscure thing that only some people know about. I mean, the types of normies who now do that racialization of it, they just didn't know anything about it. And if you even try to talk about it with them, they'd be like, oh, you know so much about politics. Wow. You know a lot about Africa. That's really cool. But now the very same people have the utmost confidence.
Yeah, exactly. All completely unwarranted and based on these stupid, sort of oppressor, oppressee, literal black and white models, which are just they just suck all of the historical context out of things and reduce it to the most superficial kind of aesthetic situation. Usually, this is for the benefit. It's for the benefit of one of these groups to be used in a propagandistic way, generally to achieve some, like, if not genocidal, some sort of move on the other population. You know what I mean? And just effectively, they use this to sort of like curry favor with Westerners.
Oh yeah,
this paradigm. Yeah,
and so this is sort of related. This was another thing that I think I wanted to talk about was another thing that was coming up a lot was and Pill Eater has been talking about this extensively. The thing that originally made the alt-right meaningful, and again, using alt-right in sort of a big tent sense, was the fact that it was weird and queer. The fact that it was strange, it was novel, it was interesting. I mean, $1 Million Extreme is a perfect example. There's plenty of like shit libs that like $1 Million Extreme because of its weird novelty, and all that kind of stuff. And then that created the platform that ended up disseminating arguments that, may even have influenced Trump. I mean, obviously with the trade stuff, that was happening on its own, but a lot of the immigration stuff was articulated by people on the alt-right, and I do think that it did influence a lot of more mainstream views. But then, of course, what ended up happening is when people end up pushing so hard that they just want the alt-right to be a vessel for normies being normies, right? But we want to be normies in a white society. Well, that's kind of like, I guess this is relating thematically to what we were talking about earlier about, if simply saying, screw those people, this is our land, if that was, if that were sustainable, then it would have worked, right? And so trying to sort of take away the novelty or the strange stuff, the bizarre spectacle of something like in the alt-right, you're going to just end up with like all the alt-right arguments, but without any mimetic vehicle. And then the types of normie conservatives that are normies are going to end up just rejecting any sort of idea that's outside of their comfort zone. Whereas if it has, culture is changed by queers, right? That's kind of what Pillar's been getting at.
Yeah. I think that, sorry, testing. Yeah, I'm coming through. Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree with your take. What is it? Someone said in the chat, oh, it was you. Yeah, this was described well in the Class Goggles video. And yeah, I remember watching that video, the Class Goggles video. I don't know if it's still up, but that's an old Ryan Falk video that I remember from what feels like it's probably at least 4 years ago. That was like when I was
on
first
his old ANCAP channel and on the Fringe the Alternative Hypothesis.
Yeah. That's got to be at least like 4 or 5 years old. But yeah, I remember watching that video, and yeah, he does talk about sort of this. I firsthand came into contact with this form of narrative shaping. I've been around it since the day I was born. I just couldn't quite put a finger on exactly what it was, and it took a while encountering it to sort of get a sense of what it was and how exactly it worked. But I viscerally even kind of understood, that it was this binary, it was, and whether this is something that's being pushed by the Western left or the Western right, or, some third party wishing for people to think something, is like, this is just sort of a pervasive theme. You have the situation that we described earlier, the two roles, the oppressee, oppressor, black, white, developing, imperial versus imperialist. Yeah. The authentic versus the colonial, etc. Yeah. And it's just so people who want to play some moral games just love stuff like that so much.
Right.
And hold on. Someone I just want to say, someone in the chat says it's funny that Pill Eater got Irony Bros to consider they may be queer. Yeah, that's good, and that's why Pill Eater's based.
And they were more
interesting. Yeah.
They were more open to that than Halsey. Like, it's funny because I found Halsey to be pretty perceptive, but he was having a really hard time getting what Pill Eater was saying, and that's got to be generational or experiential.
And I think it's also like Halsey's like this trad, like like someone in the chat was saying earlier, like trad Halsey was like trying to shut down the queerness, like that whole thing, like TradCon Halsey.
I think he might have been
to shut down the queers. Yeah,
right. I think he may have been feigning lack of understanding in light of that. I don't mean in a critical way.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think he just didn't want to engage, for whatever reason. And I also also because he isn't, in a way, he is kind of like very much a normal type. Like he's like trucker hat. He's like
he's definitely like a high IQ normie.
Yeah, but he is I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. He's got like his vape and his hat, and he's probably just a dude who lives in the suburbs, or whatnot. I don't know that much about what real Americans are and what aren't, though. So, like, I don't even want to speak on that. But let's see. Did we all learn one thing from this stream? I'm too tired to give a take like that right now. But one thing from this stream, or the last stream. I think he meant the last. Wait, which stream? One take from this stream. This stream or the last stream? Sorry. I mean, I think that the takes speak for themselves. The one take, I think that is the sort of that binary model, probably. But let's see. There was a funny thing in the chat. Evie, they're talking about the children of the lie. Evie says he doesn't realize the children of the lie are all grown up. And Solid Snack says race theory breaks down with Mediterraneans because some are brown-skinned and considered white, and some are fair-skinned and considered brown. Yeah, this is why, first of all, the like the Mongoloid, Caucasoid, Australoid, Negroid model is bullshit. And what else is bullshit is the brown, black, white, yellow model, which is even more bullshit. And really, if we're going to be talking about like quote race or like the genetic stuff behind ethnicity, what we should be looking at is like basically understand that most modern like ethnic groups are basically composites of other kind of like groups such as like ancient North Eurasian or Basal Eurasian or things like that, different groups that come out of those mixed in varying degrees at different points in time that then like stuck together for various periods of time and, went through different selection processes and stuff like that. I mean, it's still fascinating stuff, and it's still very much, there is very much a genetic sort of reality, biological reality to this stuff. It's just far more nuanced than some silly New World colonial model that was created before modern genetics even existed. It was going to even scrape the surface when it comes to describing the reality of the matter at hand. In fact, I mean, I always thought that the term white, the whole white concept is really just stupid. Just because it's like, why bother? Say what you mean. If you mean European, say European. If you mean pale-skinned West Eurasian people, say pale-skinned West Eurasian people. I know it might be a little longer to say than white, but if you're saying white, what do you mean? I mean, where does the margin of white end? Is white kind of like a cultural signifier in America? If so, I mean, it's an in-group, out-group demarcator, but what exactly does that mean, in-group, out-group? When a black person on the street says to you, "Man, you so white," or like some BuzzFeed commentator says, "Listen, this is like," or like some white, clever white person who's so woke is like, like this video is literally the whitest thing I've ever seen. Like, what are they saying? And I think it's interesting to play around with and think about what these concepts actually mean and how they're used, kind of how they function, what do they literally mean. I mean, and ultimately, words should be, if you're going to use a term, that term you better damn well like understand the meaning and connotations of that term and be prepared to, sort of narrate and author your own meanings around that term, and sort of like kind of like make a case in turn, like sort of have your own case for why this is even something that ought to be. Every term you use, you're giving credence to that term, to that concept. So yeah, this is interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that white nationalists make a terrible mistake when they uncritically use white as a category without any, when they don't even need to. I mean, if you mean Germany, if you mean Germans, say Germans. If you mean Italians, say Italians. If you mean white Americans, say white Americans. If you mean real Americans, founding stock, when they do something like using white in and of itself, it immediately opens the door up for people. Now, of course, this argument is used in bad faith, but for people to use the bad faith argument of, like, you make a good point. Where exactly is the line? Are Turks, who are many of whom are basically assimilated Greeks and Armenians anyway? Are they white? Are Armenians white? This whole discussion is very stupid, but it is a legitimate question. But what people do is when they say things like, the rights of white people, they do kind of open themselves up for that criticism, for that question. And then a lot of the time, what ends up happening? You end up having these silly discussions where half of the people say, well, Albanians don't count. Albanians are not, and then of course, immediately, like, what are you doing when you do that? The moment that discussion gets thrown and then somebody starts saying that Albanians are not white, or, I mean, even JF had that video where he was talking about the definition of white, and he was actually looking at like a genetic analysis with the clustering, and he ended up saying, Greeks are not quite white. Ordinary on the street considers Greeks white. Like, that's not, like, that is completely normal. People, like, Greeks are white. I mean, if your definition of white doesn't include Greek, and like I hear Otto here saying Turks are white. Fair enough. I mean, I don't even disagree, but clearly, politically speaking, I mean, here's a good test. When there's a conflict between Greece and Turkey, like when Turks want to build a mosque in Greece, how is that perceived by neoliberalism? That's a minority. Why are the Greeks being xenophobic? Greeks, even like a Greek person trying to wave a Greek flag at the Hagia Sophia. That's like white supremacy. Well, that's a pretty good litmus test of politically whether a group is white. If Greeks act nationalistic, is that white supremacist? If so, then they're white. So genetically, as far as I understand, and like I said, I understand that it varies substantially throughout Turkey, but as far as I understand, definitely some Turks today are basically just a mishmash of Greeks and Armenians and some other effectively, European groups that have become culturally assimilated as Turks. But of course, over time, many of them have mixed. And so a lot of the darker Turks are from rural areas. And so, a lot of the more educated Turks that you used to see would look very white, and they would be like sort of secular Muslims. And then, lately, with higher population growth in the rural areas and then urbanization, you see more of the Middle Eastern type in Turks. So, I mean, that's just a good example.
All right, so there's some comments in the chat. Someone says, American whites used to see themselves as a unique ethnic group. They were called, quote, Americans, and realized themselves as such with strong ties to Europe, but that changed in the 20th century, largely due to a concerted intellectual deconstruction of American white identity. Was part of this deconstruction the vying for Jews to get Jews, and eventually, if I'm not mistaken, or around at the same time, other Middle Easterners and North Africans and whatnot in general included in the category? Because you say with ties to Europe, I mean, like, I know that at least my people, pushed for a very long time to both, decrease the Europeanness of the white identity and increase the perception of Jews as being a European or a, quote, white people in order to fit into that category. Just in time, alas, it seems, finally we get recognized as white just in time for white to be this thing that's almost solely externally negatively defined. And thanks in large part, if not almost exclusively due to us. But, it's funny the way things played out, due to us and other people who have perspectives similar to ours, other sort of diasporic or minority or outsider kind of perspectives. Yeah.
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 Well, and I mean, Steve Saylor talks about the flight from white, how like, especially like younger Armenians growing up in LA, you see more and more trying to say that like they're not white. I saw something horrible.
Of course. I mean, check it white. Check it right. We're not white, or whatever it's called. That whole movement that's done by Jews and Arabs and Persians and Lebanese people and Middle and North Africans, but it makes perfect sense, and Assyrians, but it makes perfect sense because first of all, who would want to be white? Like I even noticed a trend of like European Americans today, like young European Americans, like they're not like, oh well, I'm really white and like I love being white and like white this, white that, because we all know that it's not. No one wants to be white because white isn't like this. White being a white American may have once been this thing or almost starting to coalesce into this thing, but more often than not, like the ones who are proud of their identity, they're going to talk about how they're Irish or they're Italian or they're Eastern European or something like that, and even will try to cling to those identities more than say their parents or their grandparents did, because
or even Southern.
Yeah, or I'm Southern, exactly. I'm Southern, but no one who says like, oh well, I'm a white American, I'm a white Yankee cracker American, sorry.
Except for the freak show that ends up turning people off from group identity, right? Like,
yeah,
except for
sadly. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, and then there are people who are just like, yeah, I'm okay with being white, but it's like, those people are few and far between. Those people generally, like people who are sort of like Devin Tracy, for lack of a better example, but like, just sort of like apolitical kind of people who are just like, yeah, unabashedly, like, yeah, it's okay to be white, but it's like those people are, too few and far between. Usually it's just like, oh, well, I don't really like it. And I wish I was something a little bit more authentic and a little bit more like something. And like, because really there's nothing cool about being white. And who really wants to be white after all? And like, because I mean, what do you point to when you say, being white? It's like it's just shat on. It's just like what is left there for someone to be white? Like to be white in America today, it's all going to be a bunch of negative stuff. Right. Like, who wants that? You know what I mean? Better to be interested in like your Serbian grandmother and your Romanian grandfather and your I don't know, so that
or your fictional Native American
heritage, heritage, or your fictional Native American something, or the fact that you're I'm 15% Jewish or something like that.
Yeah, and like. I think a lot. It can be a stand-in for negative historical things, and it can also be a stand-in for neoliberalism, which is funny because I mean, the people that make these arguments are overwhelmingly neoliberals. But sort of the whole point of neoliberalism is that you claim not to like it, and so whiteness has become basically a stand-in for like all the things that we identify but don't like about globalization, right? And that sort of binds people to this globalization-based identity that no one actually likes, but which is being promoted out is like the whole Louis C.K. thing, where you sort of make fun of the idea of white people, but you concede that you are white as part of a way to say that you have a special insight into what makes these people so boring and banal. Stand-ins.
Yeah, exactly. And like, there are people who, and like, even people who do say, it's okay to be white, they'll be doing it with a tinge of irony. Like, haha, I'm just another basic white bitch. I like my Starbucks and my Uggs and my Lululemon yoga pants or something like that. Like, I like my Chipotle. Haha, me, I'm just a simple, normal little white girl. I like to watch The Bachelor. Haha. I like to watch the coronation ceremony. I like Kate Spade and whatever. It's like, yeah, like, it's just like, it's that sort of ironic detached where it's like, they won't be the total, like, self-hating or be like totally down on it. But it's like the ironic, the little tinge of irony there. So, even then, hiding the lack of, but I mean, what at the same time, that is a bleak vision. What is, because I do think there is some validity to the, stupid, like, cracker mayonnaise, like, Kraft cheese ass, like, no culture having, white suburban people who just live in their little car pods and all they do is just consume, and there's no real authentic culture. But it's like, okay, so what's like the alternative? Because it's like whenever there's an alternative, like that's viewed as, God forbid, just like everything even more evil than the identityless white people, because that's the affirmatively kind of like European kind of like thing, which is inherently exclusionary. And, people don't like that either, especially when it's like the majority group in a society doing it, like white Americans, for instance. So that makes even more butthurt. So it's like, what is someone to do? And this isn't even really my issue because, I'm a Middle Easterner and a Jew. It's like I have the check it white, you ain't right. Check it right, you ain't white option. I'm right. I don't feel an allegiance to like European Americans or like white Americans really that much, outside of the fact that we're going to get grouped together when it's like La Raza or black people or whatever coming and being like, hey, check your white privilege, or coming and being like, hey, fucking white boy, like that flack will still very much be directed towards us. It's the same, if not more, because in a way, and this is also something I talked about, is that Jews are almost perceived as hyper white insofar as quote to be quote white, as it's perceived by like a lot of POC in let's say New York City is to be cerebral or bookish or like less physically inclined, someone who might have spectacles and stay inside reading or doing research on the computer or playing video games or chess, as opposed to someone who likes to play basketball or sing or dance or go out and go to the gym or stuff like that. So it's interesting. It's really interesting. Someone who's a little awkward, a little nebbish, someone who's that's white. That's white. So Jews are hyper white also in this other sense, which is something that I really find fascinating, because even though Jews are less white by a pretty significant margin than the average European, insofar as they are less European, they are more Middle Eastern. They are culturally almost these uber whites in the eyes of many POC who care not to differentiate. And even if they do know about that difference, that isn't even how they view whiteness. Like, they don't view whiteness as a sliding scale where it's like, oh well, Middle Easterners are like a bit less are less white, and then you have Europeans that are more white. Like, they view whiteness as like a different thing, where it's like the most white person is the most kind of nebbish, the most awkward, the most straight-laced, the most buttoned down, as it were, the most combed over. You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, and that's how they make those other concepts fit. What reminds them of white people. Well, you could argue that's really what reminds them of New York Jews.
Yeah, exactly. So Judas, welcome to the show. Sorry, I'm just gonna Judas, geez, your mic sounds awful. But it's good to have Judas on the show. Yes, I do hear you. Man, Chris, you've been having some great takes. I'd love to have you on the show again sometime.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to take a note. Yeah. Oh, you do?
Yeah,
please do. If you have any final thoughts, feel free to stay in the chat. I'm just gonna take a quick 5 to 10 minute shower, and then I'm gonna pop back on here. But if you're gone by the time I get back, well, it's been great talking to you, and you're always welcome to join. Yeah. Nice. Anyway, floor is yours, Chris and Judas.
Cool. Well, I'll leave it to you because I need to use a restroom and get some stuff ready. But I'll be listening. So.
All right. Just woke up. It's 5 in the morning here in LA. What was I looking for? Start reading shit for all of you. Hey guys, we are Judas Star Live. Damn it. can't find it to not everything process. Okay, push shot. Hold on, guys. I'm trying to find some story for you. Oh my gosh, dude, I can't find it. Guys, I want to reach the Midrash says, but the stuff isn't necessarily literal. It's meant to teach lessons. Dude, I can't find it. I want to read the story of Tower of Babylon. Oh, here it is. Ham's son, Cush, begot a son who later became renowned as the infamous Nimrod. In fact, Nimrod is known by 3 names. He was called Cush on account of his black skin. He was also called Amraphel, meaning he who said to cast Abraham into the cauldron. He was commonly famous as Nimrod, symbolic of his character, he who caused everyone to rebel against Hashem. Nimrod persuaded people with a glib tongue to serve idols. He was cunning and a cold-blooded murderer. He was the first one to make use of the permission to eat animal meat, which he used to hunt with spear and arrow. Soon his fame spread, and an unparalleled hunter whose arm never missed the target, and he became the talk of the time. The true key to his hunting success, however, was well concealed from everyone. When Noah had left the ark, he took out the garments that Hashem made for Adam, whatever that means. Very literal, it's not part. Noah's son Ham stole them and strictly passed them to his own son Cush, who in turn bequeathed the garments to the most beloved of his sons, Nimrod. Adam's garment enabled the wearer to subdue all animals. The beast fell whenever Nimrod, who was clothed in Adam's garments, drew his bow and arrow. But the people of the generation attributed his success to his strength and skill. When Nimrod was 40 years old, a war broke out between his relatives, the descendants of Ham and the descendants of Yafet. Nimrod gathered a large army of the family of Cush and went to battle at their head. He emerged victorious and brought the enemy captives back as slaves. On his return, his brother and friends called the meeting and crowned Nimrod as their king. Nimrod thereupon claimed to be of divine power and ordered his subjects to prostrate themselves before him. Nimrod's generation was acquainted with the story of the Mabul, the flood, and lived in dread that a similar event might occur. There they searched for a place where they could all settle together in safety and found a valley in the land of Babylon big enough to contain all of them. Hashem provided them with a tremendous valley so that they should not claim, had we had only been able to live together in one place, Hashem would have been powerless against us. People now crowned Nimrod as king over them, and since they all settled in Babel, he became the ruler of the entire population of the earth. Nimrod said to the people, "Let us build a big city in which all of us can live together. It will be erected. In it we will erect a very high tower." The idea was enthusiastically accepted by all nations. Mizraim said to Cush, and Cush put to Canaan, "Let us build a tower so that we will reach the heaven, and we will make for ourselves a name, lest we be scattered over the globe by another flood." How could they actually believe that a tower could save them from another deluge? Were they not informed by the previous generations that all attempts to escape Hashem's punishing armor are fruitless, as it was clearly shown by the Mabul, by the flood? The wicked. Although the generation of Endos who were idol worshippers were punished with a flood that drowned a third of humanity, whatever that means, the next generation never took a lesson. They rebelled against Hashem and they were destroyed in the Mabul. Now a new generation, the generation of the dispersed Ador HaFlaga, arose and again failed to learn from the events of the past. While it was unanimous among the necessity of a tower, their ideas about its purpose differed. One part of the populace had in mind, in case of another flood, we will climb up to the top of the tower, and the water will not reach us. Another group, those who said, we'll make for ourselves a name, intended to use the top of the tower as a place of assembly to worship idols. A third group stated, it is not right that Hashem alone is the position of the upper spheres, limiting our dominion to the lower worlds. We'll set up an idol at the top of the tower, put a sword in his hand, and show him that war is never declared against him. All the above mentioned groups thus had in mind to rebel against Hashem, but there was yet a segment of the people who were far worse, denying Hashem's existence altogether. They had a rational explanation for every event in the universe and explained that the Mabul, scientifically analyzed, was nothing but a natural phenomenon. They stated, once every 1,656 years, the amount of years between the creation and the flood, 1656, the heavens shake, causing a flood. To prevent the flood's heavens from collapsing again, we must take precautions by building supports, one in the north and one in the south and one in the west. The first pearl will be in this tower in the east in the valley of Babel. Although the people had planned to build a tower, they never carried out the plan, but concentrated on the tower. The tower was a tremendous undertaking. Since there were no stones in Babylon, which was a valley, they invented their own building materials by baking cement in a brick furnace and using the bricks as stones. Hashem granted them unusual success, so they should not later claim, if he had only let us build the tower, we would have been able to overcome him. The bricks were fabricated as if by themselves. When the people affixed one brick, they found two in the wall. When they put down two, they found four set up. The tower grew and grew, and soon as it was so high that it took, I'm very sleepy, I just woke up. The tower grew and grew, and soon was so high that it took a year to climb to the top. There were 2 rows of steps, one in the east and one in the west of the tower. Those in the east were used for upward traffic, those in the west for descending from the town summit. They had to commute up and down constantly to get the building materials. I'm so sleepy still. I got some good sleep last night. Took my meds early. I took my meds at 10:30. I was out. Excuse me. I'm supposed to go to shul soon. No, not school, shul. I can't stay on for too long. I'm only staying for another hour. Less than that, another 4 minutes. So fanatically were they in their zeal to complete the tower that if a brick fell down and broke all weapons, saying, how difficult will it be to replace it? If a man fell down and died, however, no one would even look at him. A man, 48 years old, was walking past the site of construction. His name was Avram ben Terah. He was well known for being opposed to the tower project. When the people had come to him with the invitation, join us in the enterprise of building the tower, for you are a strong man, and will be of great help. He refused, saying, you forsook Hashem, who is the tower, and choose instead to substitute a tower made of bricks. When Avram passed and noticed the builders, he cursed them in Hashem's name, saying, destroy, O God, and divide their tongues. Avram's rebuke went unheeded. The people mockingly responded, "Look at this barren mule. He is childless." Avram trying to convince people to believe in Hashem. They therefore countered by arguing that he was childless, citing this as a proof that Hashem does not reward his followers. Besides Avram, 3 more people remained aloof from the involvement in the construction of the tower: Noah, his son Shem, and his son Eber. Ever is where we get the name Hebrew. Ever comes from the name Ever, which is the name Shem. Jews are descendants of Shem. Shem reproved his son and grandsons for taking part in the building. "Against whom do you want to fight?" he asked them. "Against whom who created the upper and lower wells?" But no one took his rebuke to heart except one of the Shem's sons, Ashur, who is the father of Assyria, who removed himself from the enterprise, saying, "How can I live together with these wicked people?" He subsequently left the country and settled in a desolate spot outside of Babylon. "I swear to you," said Hashem, "that I shall give you 4 cities in return." Ashur built 4 cities, among them the big city of Nineveh, Nineveh was the place that Jonah went to. He was in Nineveh. Okay, this sort of romantic Bieber tie-in, because he's always talking about the Book of Jonah. Alright, we got that good. There's some continuity going on.
Judas.
Multi-straight,
Judas, can you hear me? Judas, can you hear me? Judas, can you hear me?
Check the chat. I want some fun, guys. Hold up. They're all probably making fun of me in the chat. So they hate me because I'm black. White people hate black people. Shit, my anecdotal experience: white people hate black people.
This is Talmud Studies with Babs, the podcast. Afro revisionism. Moses was a black man. Moses' wife was Ethiopian, according to Rashi. I've always made a subconscious association with pipe organs and flowing water, particularly the more flute-like stops and registrations. Yeah, I like that imagery, Mr. Daniel. Let's see. We need to talk to a rabbi about whether Nimrod was a black man. What are you reciting, Judas? What did I miss? Judas, what
I was reading the Midrash says.
Judas, what did I miss?
I was reading Midrash says on the story of the Tower of Babel.
So Judas.
That's the Judas Star Chai show now.
No, okay, it's the Judas Star Chai show now. Then again, go ahead. If you want that responsibility, then take it. But don't disappoint me, Judas. The floor is yours.
Ask me anything. AMA. Yeah.
Anything. Well, all right. Well, let's start with things that are less personal. Your profile pictures. Tell me what makes you choose your profile pictures? I know you chose one of Koichi from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable, because I requested it. I said that photo reminded me of you, and I demanded you make it your profile picture. You obliged, being the gentleman that you are. What about this profile picture, though? The Peanuts. Why'd you choose Charlie Brown? Can you relate to him?
It's just to be a reference to MGTOW.
It's supposed to be a reference to MGTOW? Why is that?
Yeah. It's a little boy saying, no one's going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. That's sort of the point of my channel is to like inform young men into how not to be cucked.
Interesting. It's kind of vague. I'm not sure if MGTOW is the first thing that would come to mind when I hear that.
It could be all multiple things, and one of them is MGTOW.
Are you MGTOW?
No.
Why MGTOW?
I mean, I'm not MGTOW, but I'm interested in MGTOW.
what was your profile picture before it was Koichi? It was something kind of horrendous, wasn't it, at one point?
Yeah, it was something like monster. I wanted to like make everyone feel bad.
You wanted to make everyone feel bad. Talk about that, Judas.
Yeah, I wanted them to see I wanted them to see an ugly picture. I wanted them to see an ugly picture and be like, "Oh man, it's ugly." I wanted to destroy beauty.
You're a creep. You're a weirdo.
It's a burn.
What the hell are you doing here? You don't belong here.
I stopped listening to Gentile.
Dude, do you like that song? What, the first time you came in with that profile picture? The first time, Judas, the first time that you came into my chat with that profile picture, you were talking about that Radiohead song. Why?
Really? Was I?
Yes, really. Yes, really. Yeah, you were really talking about that.
I think I was just trying to be ironic.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. And you
it was really troll my man. Sure.
This is really just this is some great content that's going on right now. I love this stuff. I'm just gonna vault it away once the stream is done, and then maybe watch it like 10 years from now and be like, that's funny. I was sort of singing along with the free lo-fi background hip-hop music whilst talking to Judas Star Chai 250.
Yeah, those are good times, man.
Chris, man, dude, thank you for coming on, gracing the show with your presence. Please feel free to rejoin us at any point. But Judas, talk about what medication were you on, if you don't mind me asking.
Last night I took my Resperdal. I took 2 milligrams of Resperdal, like last.
Bro, turn the portrait lock off on your phone, you freaking goofball.
What's portrait lock?
Right now your phone's locked on portrait mode. You need to flip it so that you can be in like landscape mode. That's better.
Alright.
Sweet. So Resperdal, what does Resperdal do? What's that for?
It's an antipsychotic.
Okay, is it what is it, like a typical or atypical antipsychotic? Like, what's it related to? Is it similar to like
it makes you sleepy.
It makes you sleepy. Yeah, a lot of antipsychotics do that. Is it something where you take it the day of and you feel the effects, or you take it over time and it builds up in your bloodstream?
I take Resperdal at night and then it makes me go to sleep within an hour.
So how long do you take it for? Like months?
I've taken it for 6 months already.
Yeah. Why is the camera jiving? Are you shuckling right now? Shuckling and jiving?
Scratching my leg.
You're just shuckling. Judas, you need to put the camera on like a bookshelf or something so that it has a flattering angle of your face. Not down. That's not good. Yeah, well, that's kind of better. Yeah, bookshelf. Put it on a bookshelf or something. A bit more straight. Yeah, that's better. But higher up. Maybe.
Higher.
You can figure it out. You're smart. You're a smart lad. I like how you're wearing your dressing gown or bathrobe or whatever. Dressing gown, bathrobe, or is that what it is? You're some sort of smoking like a smoking jacket? I can't exactly tell what you're wearing.
It's like, well, this is actually.
Or no, you're just wearing a lumberjack shirt, aren't you? That sort of has a big collar.
This is reference for Orthodox Judaism anime. Like, this is supposed to be like.
What is that? Is that a bathrobe? It's sort of a. It's like a tartan robe.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like my anime version villain version character.
Oh, that's true. That is an anime villain kind of garment, dude. Maybe you needed to get a bit more stylized for some true anime action. Talk about the Orthodox anime that's coming, and also flip the camera back to landscape mode, you big dummy. That's better. All right, talk about the anime. That's good. Good optics. Your room's very neat, bucko.
There are really serious issues with making Orthodox Judaism.
Speak up a bit. Speak up a bit.
There's very serious issues with making a Orthodox Jewish anime, because there's all these halakhic issues with what you're allowed to show in art and stuff, which is why I deleted my soundtrack playlists that were really deep. I stopped making them because then I got to the point where okay, I don't want anything to do with this anymore, because I reached a certain level of my Jewishness. and then and also a lot of these, like, you can't really like open the Midrash or open the Talmud and read like the Agadas, the moralistic stories, because a lot of them were not meant to be taken literally. And to like go and like read those, like the stuff I just read, like to like go and like depict all of this in an anime would be like extremely irresponsible, and it could like possibly like make people into like atheists when they grow up. And they find out the truth, and they get disillusioned.
Interesting. Thank you, Anthony Zenti, in the comment section for reminding me of the word I meant. Instead of lumberjack shirt, silly urbanite that I am, what I meant to say is flannel. But yeah, I'm not even sure what that is. But so yeah, it looks like the Jewish anime is canceled for now, or postponed.
We can make a Jewish anime that like takes place, say, like in the 1600s. Something that's like a post-Talmudic Jewish anime.
All right, I'm interested. But I would like it to happen. I'd like to have an anime about Mizrahi Jews. Actually, we can star in it as the two leads. I think it should be in the 18. I think it should be in the like maybe like the 1800s or the 1900s. How do you feel about that?
Why? I want something.
I think it could have because I think it could have some cool action scenes.
I think it would be better if you could have it in like the Shabtai Tzvi era and have like a Shabtai Tzvi type.
Okay, interesting.
Type villain.
Ooh. Okay, I'm interested in that. I'm interested in that kind of thing. And yeah, what kind of abilities do you think he'd have?
I know the rabbi in the synagogue. He works for RCC. He said that the Jacob Frank was able to like be on top of a boulder while it was floating on water.
That's some anime shit right there. Beautiful. Exactly. I see your vision, Judas. Trust me. I've been thinking about Jewish anime since before I met you, dog. I don't want to go too deep on this episode right now, but
if you want good reference for a Jewish anime, you should read the history books written by Rabbi Avigdor Miller. He wrote one called Behold the People, Torah Nation, and Holy something else. Like he wrote these really good history books that like should make this comparison, maybe like Lord of the Rings or something.
Yes, epic. It's an epic Magian mythos, sort of like as Spengler would put it. You need to read, Judas, about Spengler's description of the, quote, sort of Magian civilization. I think that his descriptions of Magian spirituality would really appeal to you, and it's something that we should discuss in further. Anime. A Mediterranean anime. Yes, we need a Mediterranean anime. Yes, an anime set in Ottoman Iraq under the Georgian Mamluks in the 18th century. Yes, that's what I was thinking about, is Ottoman-era animes. And yes, I am Gen Z. I'm the very cusp of Gen Z. And Judas is not Gen Z. Judas is a millennial. But new song. Because this new song is coming on. Because we're about to introduce an episode of we're starting this new segment of the Babylonian Hebrew Show. And it's called Cribs with Babylonian Hebrew. This is called Cribs. Judas, would you like to show off your cribs? We're going to call it Bait. House. What's a good name to call it? It's like Jewish cribs. What do we call Jewish cribs?
I don't know. I don't know that much about Judaism or Jewishness, to be quite honest with you.
All right, so show off the crib, Judas. If you wake your family up and get busted, I will. That's not cool. Be quiet, okay, dude? Start with your bookshelf. Show off your books. Show off your Jewish books. No. Don't go to the playroom yet. Go back to your room. Judas. Judas, no, you're going to wake Ima up. You're going to wake Abba and Ima, Judas. Go back to your room.
The man, the legend.
All right, show your Jewish books, Judas.
I have my history book about Hitler right next to my Talmud. Mama Shashanta.
Wait, testing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wait, can you guys hear me? I don't even know.
Here's a pillbox to show you how crazy I am. I'm gonna fill it. I don't bother to. I like having it. This is my other bookshelf. I can't go outside. I can't go out because, like, I can't turn on the light because we can't do cribs right. I can do cribs outside.
Stop creaking that door, you dumbass. Shush. Be quiet. Be quiet.
Dude, we can't do cribs at this hour.
Dude, this is stealth ops. This is stealth ops. Yeah, shut up. Shut up. That's why you're only doing cribs of your room right now. Show off your Jewish books. I was only expecting you to show your room. I thought your room was just like a studio apartment or something. I forgot you live with your ima. Like,
I live in a house.
Dude, I live in an apartment with my ima, and I also have a house in in Brooklyn, and I also am going to buy a property in DC hopefully soon, God willing. But
stunning.
Yeah, stunning. Dude, let's give us a tour of the just when I said cribs, I just meant the space that you are currently occupying when shooting the video, namely the books. Let's go book by book, and you can tell the audience the
this book. You see this book? This book is called Otzar Kippah. It's all about like pretty much like all the like classic sources in the Talmud and Midrash about kippahs and halacha about kippahs. This is actually a 2-volume series. The reason I'm showing this to you is because I was given these books as after I got ejected from a yeshiva program for being too based.
Define being too based for yeshiva. Define being too based and getting ejected from yeshiva.
I called someone like a fake rabbi for saying I didn't have to have a porn filter on my internet. Even though I was right, but I shouldn't have expressed myself like that.
And was it a Pyrrhic victory, Judas?
I was right, but I couldn't be too based, and then they were uncomfortable with me because the people around me weren't as. Or
sorry, not a Pyrrhic victory. It's not a Pyrrhic victory. It's just sort of loss upon taking a moral point. It's literally not, because you weren't victorious. And turn that.
I was right in spirit.
Turn that damn alarm off immediately, Judas. Turn it off.
It's not my alarm. What alarm?
You didn't hear that.
This is not in my room.
That's not in your room. Then where's it coming from? Did anyone else hear that? Not. Hold on. This is good content. Yeah, sure it is. The good content is Judas talking about his books and getting kicked out of yeshiva. No, getting kicked out of yeshiva for taking a moral stance. You were a martyr, is what it was. You were a martyr, and you went down, like, you went down fighting. You went down with the ship. It was an honorable, defeat for your cause, and you took it like a Jew, as it were.
Oh, and you know what's something else? I was kind of like mad that they gave me this book in Hebrew that I can't even read. It's about a subject that I have no incentive to learn at all whatsoever. I don't know. I kind of feel bad about it.
You could learn if you want, Judas. Beard oil would go a long way for you. I have similar facial hair texture, and beard oils helps me a lot. Because your facial hair just sort of goes. Yeah, sort of, no, and oils and waxes, both. Because your facial hair will just sort of, like, go in random directions. Put some argan oil in it or something like that. Your mustache is going all over the place, dude. Also, trim your mustache below your nose. Or,
I don't trim.
Okay, then don't trim, then that's good. Then quaff it off to the side with some oil. Quaff it off to the side with some oil.
No, I want to look like Hitler.
No, you don't want it to droop over your nose. You don't want it to have little tarantula fangs. What you want is to quaff it off to the side.
In that one speech.
Yeah, but why do you aspire to look like, quote, Hitler in that one speech?
He makes me feel powerful.
All right, that's a fair answer. So anyway, back to your book collection, Judas. The audience is curious.
Yeah. Really. Well, this is called This book is called Most Beautiful Nation. for how beautiful the Jewish people are. By Rabbi Victor Miller.
Victor Miller, one of your favorites.
Rabbi Victor Miller loves the Jewish people.
Rabbi Victor Miller. Sorry, what did you say? Dude, you love him. You always reference him. Tell me about the book.
I know,
Tell me about the book.
He's Rabbi. Oh, he was Rabbi Rabs' rabbi.
Wait, Judas, hold on one second. Keep showing off your books, but I just realized that it's like 8 in the morning and someone's knocking at the door right now, so I just need to figure out who that is.
Oh, really?
Handle the stream.
Okay. All right. Here's some more. This is the Bible in Hebrew with the commentaries. Sorry. I'm laughing about a joke I said the other day. This is a book I need to get rid of. Here's a biography. The Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim. The Heilige Chafetz Chaim. No, I should make Lysianus, I'm sorry. This is a book about Brit Milah, ritual circumcision. He's another Talmud. My dad bought me this Talmud. I sure as hell didn't buy this Talmud myself. Have you ever wondered what if Judas has been an extremely elaborate troll this whole time? And he actually hates Judaism and just wants to make a mockery and spite this Judaism by making it seem look how stupid it is. I have those suspicions about Rabbi Rabs. Rabbi Rabs, he was always trying to tell me how Jews are superior. He's always Ed Miller is always Jews are superior and they kill all goy people. Sleep all goyim, kill them all. That's Rabbi Victor Miller. We ain't gonna be eating no more Chinese. I'm not kidding, he really said that. There's a book. It's about his Shabbat dress show sermons. And he was like, Chinese food is goyish. Only goy eat Chinese food. It's well, it's based.
Rabbi Rabs. Hell, yo, Judas, I leave for 1 second and your camera's all messed up. There are 10 Fresh Direct boxes sitting out, not Fresh Direct boxes, but food delivery boxes sitting outside, and I need to deal with them. Get the camera straight. Good. And then continue to show your books. Talk about the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim. The Nietzsche stash.
Okay, that's fairly ironic.
Someone called the mustache a Nietzsche stash. Do you know what Nietzsche's mustache looked like?
Yes.
Is that what you aspire to? Because that's the direction you're headed in.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Your mustache growth pattern seems to be... its future trajectory seems to resemble that of Nietzsche's mustache. All right, keep showing off your books. I'm gonna move the
Jewish
boxes.
Thing that Babs is a Jewish thing to have facial hair.
Yeah, well, not exclusively.
Okay.
Not exclusively.
It's a Jewish thing not to bang shigzas. Yeah.
Sorry, not to.
It's a Jewish thing not to bang shigzas.
Dude, but Halsey said shigzas are for practice in the chat.
Is Halsey's in the chat? Halsey's been watching me in the chat this whole time?
No, Halsey was in a different chat wherein he said shigzas are for practice, and I need to go move some boxes. It was in the Luke Ford chat. BRB.
Alright, here's another book called Rav Schwab on Prayer. I didn't read the whole thing, of course. I don't have any non-Jewish books, you guys. My fucking parents, they didn't teach me to read, pleasure, but then, it's Judaism, and they were you have to learn Torah. I was okay, I have to learn Torah. And I was I wanted to learn, the secrets of reality and stuff, and learn Kabbalah, and get a lot of knowledge, and I was always being told how, learning is a priority. So I made learning Torah more. I think it was just easier to read. I don't have as much incentive to learn as much as I used to, and going through like different things in life, and I think that fight just wasn't like would just not keep showing a gear. I think my life overall would just be more stable if I would just like look forward it. I think like if I just look forward it, then I think like my life would go more smoothly. But I'm not Luke Fording it. That's that's like cucking. Luke Ford's way is like to cuck. Luke isn't even really Jewish per se. Like he's just a boy who outly converted. So whatever, it's cool. He's like a LARPing Christian who got into the club somehow. Another book. Oh, I'm gonna read this book one day. Don't judge a book by its cover and other advice on finding the right mate by Rabbi Mordecai Dolinsky, who was a student of Rabbi Victor Miller, actually. Mordecai Dolinsky was a student of Rabbi Victor Miller. And actually, Rabbi Rabs has like a story about Rabbi Dolinsky, but I'm not so sure if it's like honest, like how he he saved him in Israel. On one of his like essays on the internet. Rabbi Rab's essays. I don't know if you want to spend your time reading Rabbi Rab's essays, or you can message him on Facebook. Whatever. No one cares about Rabbi Rabs, but Rabbi Rabs is like totally irrelevant today. The reason why Rabbi Rabs stopped being relevant was because he was always shitting on James Joyce and like English literature and philosophy and stuff. It was always like how it's like all about Narishkai and Gornishkai and like whatever, and so like no one wants to like watch that. No one wants to watch like a dude. I just realized like how autistic Rabbi Rabs is. But he would say his stuff with so much confidence that I would believe him. and from the very beginning, like from the onset, like early on, I learned that he apparently has permission from his rabbi to masturbate, which back then and even more today after the stuff I've been exposed to since sounds like complete fucking bullshit. Sounds like complete fucking bullshit. That's like giving someone permission to commit adultery. So whatever. I don't buy that shit. And he would downplay the sin of masturbating. He would downplay the sin of masturbation and looking at pornography. Like he would like treat it as like a very light thing. And that was like kind of weird because here in LA, like all the other rabbis are like saying something different. The ones who are like not being politically correct about it, you know, they're saying something like the complete opposite. And I'm hearing rabbis say like, "Oh, you have to die to not masturbate." I haven't seen the source for that or in the context of it, but apparently these are like mainstream. That was Rabbi Yaron Reuven. But this is why I kind of tune out Rabbi Rabs, and I kind of just, I don't know. I think he's a Platonian rabbi. By Platonian rabbi means he's just saying stuff. He's just repeating things he read in books because this is the magic key to understanding the world. Or maybe I'm just being very paranoid and can't accept that Rabbi Rabs couldn't have made like this honest mistake, because to me it's such a gargantuan mistake and I can't stand it. Even like then when I heard that he masturbates and like he has permission to masturbate and to look at pornography, I just felt uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable. So I was like, that was in like October of 2012 when I heard that. I was in a coffee shop with like a friend who was like smarter than I am. He was getting coffee and let me come because I was at this college campus that I shouldn't have been on, living on their freaking dorm, which I shouldn't have been. Man, that was a shitty experience, but it was living on a college dorm. Oh my gosh, dude, that was terrible. You will ask me about my college dorm experience that I was in for like a year. Dude, I was on a stream with Aaron, bro. I wasn't privileged to talk because everyone hated me for being black, and the Iron Bros were on it. And like, dude, I was like, I want to be an Irony bro now. I could totally make it. I could totally make. All right, I'm gonna answer some questions from the chat. Chris Ivy 1000 said, Judas, were you in a debate with Eke, Lux, and Duvid? No, I would die. You were probably speaking of the X8 Haim Massacre video. And in that, I was just in there, and I didn't really debate with them. I got into like a little thing with Babs. You asked me to turn on my camera, and my camera is already on. And Babs, I have to like leave really soon, like right now. So I don't know if you want to close the show now because I have to leave now. But I don't want to leave so abruptly. So please, you said to turn on my screen, but it's on still. So I don't know. Oh, okay, I figured it out. I know why. Because I was off. I was looking at the chat on my phone. Babs, get back on it. I need you to leave, dude. I don't want to end the stream without you on it. That'd be lame. I have to like, dude. If you're not here within like the next like 15 minutes, I'm dropping. Okay, this is another book. Here, check out this awesome picture. Here's something you could use for Jewish anime. Look at that. Look at him. This is what Hebrews looked like. Judas. Alright, Baz, I have to leave.
Could be either of our Abbas. Could be either of our dads is being that Jew.
Yeah.
That's what's up. He
even
has your eyes, Judas.
I have to leave.
He has your eyes, Judas. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Do you have any parting words?
Thank you for having me on a wonderful day. Actually, I want to close on one story.
Judas, it was a delight having you on the show. Give us your closing story.
Okay, this is Midrash Tanchuma's Midrash Parshat Vayishlach. This is probably one of my favorite Midrash streams. Oh my gosh, dude.
Judas Star Chai. Oh, Judas. Judas 250. Oh, yeah.
Does this sound like Sonic the Hedgehog guitar music? Yeah, dude, I just had it. Dude. Oh my gosh, are you freaking kidding me, bro? Dude, this is like one of the best midrashim ever, and I can't find it. Dude, it was so deep. It was such a deep midrash.
I can do a yarmulke giveaway sweepstake. Except the catch is that you have to pay for the yarmulke once you win the giveaway. No. Yeah, sure. I'll do a free yarmulke giveaway sweepstake. I'll give a signed yarmulke out. I have plenty, actually. I have plenty of duplicates as well.
What, can I sign one too?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll do a giveaway sweepstake. How do I run a giveaway sweepstake? How do I do a system? I guess just enter your name. Just enter your name and address and into like this anonymous box thing. I guess I'll find a way to like send so people can send in their names and addresses. And I guess I'll just pick a random one out of the hat. Is that how it works? Or should there be a criteria? Should there be a competition? I don't know. Trivia game? I'm not sure. Yeah, trivia night might be fun. Ooh, trivia night. I think I might. I don't think a lot of people have done that. A YouTube live hangout trivia night. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Trivia night. Is that considered gambling and shit?
Maybe some guy will find a girlfriend if he does trivia night enough, just like I did.
What did you say?
Maybe someone will get a froom girlfriend if maybe someone will get a girlfriend if he does enough trivia nights on these channels.
Yeah, I think so. That could be the case. I've made some pretty incredible things happen. Did you hear about what happened with Levi?
No, what happened to him is this is positive. I don't hear anything negative.
No, it's not negative. It's a positive thing. But it's probably best to discuss off air. But something good happened recently with him, so that's good.
What talk about?
Jewel Citizen. Didn't I follow Who Around DC for 5 minutes in an earlier video?
I found it.
Who do you mean? Who did I follow around? I was following someone around in DC. I was with a bunch of people, different people in DC, but which video are you talking about?
I'm ready to read now.
Yeah, literally Mephistopheles' ghost just gave me a $6 million idea, and I'm gonna take it. Just like how Levi Strauss took the idea of blue jeans from a white goy and patented it, and now he's famous for it. Sorry, go ahead. Judas, the floor is yours.
This is the first midrash in Midrash Nechama Parashat Vayishlach. He said to the pasuk says, "In Lavan garti, I lived with Lavan." On this, the midrash expounds. He said to Esau, "Although I lived with Laban, who is the father of all swindlers, of all thieves, for the past 20 years, I still have oxen and donkeys and much wealth." He told us to put them on notice, so that he, Esau, should reflect on it and say to himself, Yaakov passed over the river with only his staff and was with him for 20 years, and Laban is the father of all swindlers, yet he became wealthy by staying with him, and he returned safely, so how will I be able to overcome him? While these dialogues aren't necessarily literal, it could be just divine, communicating their will. I acquired oxen, this verse says. Meaning, Yaakov meant to say by this, I need have no fear of you, for Yosef had already been born, and he is called an ox, as it stated in the verse. His firstborn ox is a glory to him, and donkeys. This refers to Mashiach ben David, as it stated, the poor man riding on a donkey. This verse, and sheep. This refers to the merits of the tribes. The children are called sheep by the verse, as it says, "Now you are sheep, the sheep of my pasture." Yehuda too, Judah is the Sitan Gam Yehuda Sitan Shel Esav. Yehuda is also the Sitan Shel Esav. He's the adversary of Esau. Judah is the adversary of Esau, according to the Midrash. As it stated, the lion will eat hay like cattle, meaning a lion who is the Judah, as it stated, Judah is like a lion cub. And like cattle refers to Joseph, it says, and he will eat hay, refers to Esau, who is compared to hay, Tevin, as it stated, and the house of Esau will be Tevin, will be strong. And from where do we know that all will judge him? For it stated, "Oh, how was your mother a lioness?" The verse says, that's the verse in Ezekiel chapter 19, verse 2. This shows that all of them will judge him. And servants. This refers to Moshe, Moses, as I stated, Moshe, the Eved Hashem. Moshe was the Eved of Hashem. Moshe was the servant of Hashem, the slave of Hashem, and maidservants. This refers to Ruth, for the ancestress of King David, who has a whole book of the Tanakh about her. For David is destined to descend from her, and it's written concerning him, I am your servant, the son of your maidservant. That is, the son of the one who forfeited the opportunity to become a noble lady and queen, so as to come and shelter under the wings of the Shekhinah. That's the end. Let's do Devar Torah for the morning. Rab, did you listen? Rab, did you listen? Damn it. That was a really good one. That was meaningful to me. Babs, say something. What? Damn it. It's already 6 o'clock. I have to, bounce now. This is part of the drawback of living in a community where there's only, one very early minyan. Oh well. Bye-bye!
Judas. Judas.